Hey, welcome everybody. It's day 85 and I'm in a different location, so this looks a little bit different than normal. But we're in day 85 of Joshua 17 through 20 or 19, something like that. And I'm just going to point out a couple little things that are extremely important. And if we look in Joshua 13 verse 22, we've already gone through part of Joshua 12, I guess, Joshua 12 through whatever. The Israelites had also verse 13 of chapter 13 says, "But the Israelites failed to drive out the people of Geshur and Makkah, so they continue to live among the Israelites to this day." So here's just a point where they're talking about all the different territories where they're at, and it's kind of like a pause. And we talked about this back in Genesis, where sometimes you're having this conversation, and then you're like, well, I need to elaborate on this thought, and you take a pause to do that. So you need to read the Bible as a conversation, because sometimes all of a sudden you're like, how does this fit with where they're at today? This is not just a chronological part. Well, it is, but we have to take a pause and say, these are the things that are happening throughout this whole time period. And that's what it says. They didn't drive out everybody. Okay, and we're in this point reading through Joshua where it's showing the different battles that they went through and cleaned out the land, and they killed everybody, man, woman, and children alike. Well, there are some places where they didn't, and we haven't really got to that yet, and we've talked about some of it already. So again, the whole point is you need to try to read this as a conversation, so that when you get to something like this, you're like, oh, this is one of those moments where we're doing an overview, or we're reviewing everything in a smaller time frame. So like when we get to 1st and 2nd Chronicles, that's kind of going through everything again, written in a different form. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to show you and talk about. The next thing is just talk about Joshua just for a second. Now, as chapter 14, verse 10. "Now, as you can see, the Lord has kept me alive and well, as he promised, for all these 45 years since Moses made this promise, even while Israel wandered in the wilderness. Today, I am 45 years old." Okay, so he's, 85 years old. So think about this. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. He's 85. So they've been out doing some of these things for maybe a year or less. So let's just say he was 45 when he and Caleb went and said, "Hey, we should take the land," and the people rebelled. And God said, "Nope, you're going to stay out here for 40 years. So if he was 45 at that time, that means he was in Egypt during the time when Moses led them out. So Joshua and Caleb both knew Moses very well and were old enough during the Exodus and seasoned adults to know what was going on. So these are good people during a time period where some people may have been against Moses. So in our times like today, there are good people amongst bad people. And a lot of times that's us fighting the fight. And sometimes we think we're all alone, and we're not. Okay, so I just wanted to point out the ages. Whenever they give you an age of somebody, you should think about, well, how old are they? What was going on when they were born? And where does that fit in this chronological view? The chronological reading of the Bible is so very important to really keep everything in order. And it helps us understand the things that are going on. And then we get to chapter 15, verse 14. "Caleb drove out the 3 groups of Anakites, the descendants of Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the sons of Anak." So there, in this reading, if you remember, it was talking about Caleb getting special land because of what he had done. And definitely was promised that, and that he gets it. So what a wonderful thing to read as we learn about the chronological part and why it's important. And again, very important, read this as a conversation, because that's what it is. That's day 85. I'll see you tomorrow.